1943, Paris, occupied France. The room has no windows, no clocks, no sense of time. Just bare walls, a table, a chair, and the smell of fear that has soaked into the building over years of interrogation. The address is 84, Avenue Foch, Paris. Headquarters of the German Sicherheitsdienst, the SD, the intelligence arm of the SS. 4 captured Allied agents. It is a place few ever leave. A British operative sits bound to a wooden chair. His wrists are cuffed behind his back. His ankles are free, but the door is guarded. Escape is impossible. The Germans have already done what they always do. They searched him once at arrest. Again at intake. A third time before interrogation. Pockets emptied. Shoes removed and probed. Belt taken. Watch dismantled. Clothing examined seam by seam. The search was professional. Ruthless. Experienced. They found everything. Everything, except the blade sewn into the lining of his jacket lapel. Not a dagger. Not a fighting knife. Not even something most people would recognize as a weapon. A piece of steel barely 2 inches long. No handle. No guard. No weight. Less than 40 grams. This is the story of the smallest weapon Britain deployed in the Second World War, and one of the most desperate. A weapon for the moment after everything is lost. The lapel knife was never designed to win battles. It was not meant for ambush. Not meant for patrol. Not meant for combat. It existed for one moment only. The moment after capture. The moment after every other weapon is gone. The moment when interrogation begins. British planners understood a brutal truth. Once an SOE agent was taken alive, their survival odds collapsed. Captured agents didn't face normal imprisonment. They faced systematic dismantling. German security services, the SD, the Gestapo, the Sicherheitspolizei, had refined interrogation into an industrial process. It was methodical, coordinated, and devastatingly effective. They wanted names, addresses, radio frequencies, transmission times, safe houses, drop zones, information that could destroy entire resistance networks. Some agents endured weeks of questioning. Some lasted months. Some died without speaking. But almost none escaped. Because an unarmed prisoner, restrained inside a guarded intelligence headquarters, has no leverage. No threat. No option. SOE needed to change that, even if only by a few seconds. Britain's invisible war. By 1941, Britain's Special Operations Executive was operating across occupied Europe. Agents parachuted into France, Belgium, Norway, the Balkans. They carried radios disguised as luggage. Explosives molded to look like coal or soap. Suppressed pistols like the well rod, capable of killing without sound. SOE engineers were masters of deception. But deception ends at capture. The moment an agent was arrested, German counterintelligence stripped them of everything. Tools, weapons, even identity. Clothing was taken apart. Shoes were dismantled. Even dental work was inspected for hidden cyanide. And yet, SOE realized something critical. German searches focused on objects, not fabric. They looked for things hidden in clothing, not things that were part of the clothing. That distinction changed everything. The men who designed death up close. To solve this problem, SOE turned to 2 men who had spent their lives studying violence at arm's length. William Ewart Fairbairn and Eric Anthony Sykes. Both were veterans of the Shanghai Municipal Police, where street violence was constant, chaotic, and lethal. Fairbairn had survived dozens of knife encounters. His body carried scars from real fights, not training rooms. He studied jiu-jitsu, boxing, bayonet work, and Chinese martial arts, blending them into a system designed for one purpose: ending fights instantly. Sykes trained snipers and close combat specialists alongside him. Together, they had already created one of the war's most iconic weapons, the Fairbairn-Sykes Commando Dagger. A 7-inch blade of pure intent. But that knife was useless for a captured agent. 7 inches of steel cannot survive a full strip search. So Fairbairn and Sykes went in the opposite direction. They asked a radical question. How small can a weapon be, and still kill? The birth of the lapel knife. At Station 12, Aston House, a quiet estate in Hertfordshire, the answer took shape. The resulting weapon was so minimal it barely qualified as a knife. A blade between 1.5 and 2.5 inches long. A narrow metal grip, no wider than a thumb. No guard. No pommel. No ornamentation. Total length under 4 inches. Weight, approximately 40 grams. Some versions were double-edged. Others had a sharpened false edge for penetration. The blade geometry favored deep thrusting, not slashing. But the real innovation wasn't the blade. It was the sheath. Sewn, not hidden. The sheath was thin metal or leather, punched with tiny holes around its edge. Those holes allowed it to be stitched directly into clothing. Not taped. Not pinned. Sewn. Into jacket lapels. Into shirt collars. Into trouser seams. Into coat linings. Once installed, the knife wasn't concealed by the garment. It became part of it. A guard could pat down fabric all day and feel nothing unusual. Later production is believed to have come from H.G. Long and Company of Sheffield, while local craftsmen near Aston House produced the leather sheaths. Some knives included a small lanyard loop, allowing a cord to wrap around the agent's finger, preventing the blade from being dropped in a struggle. Variants multiplied. The standard lapel knife. A longer sleeve dagger, over 6 inches, designed purely as a spike. The ingenious insole dagger, hidden inside a shoe and retrieved by pulling a concealed cord. All were finished in matte black, absorbing light, avoiding reflection. All were invisible during search. Why this weapon was different. The lapel knife wasn't about killing guards quietly. It was about creating chaos. Fairbairn's doctrine emphasized disruption, not prolonged combat. A single strike. A sudden injury. A scream. A dropped weapon. Seconds of confusion. That was enough. Enough to break restraints. Enough to grab a gun. Enough to reach a door. In a building full of enemies, seconds were everything. Perfect, continuing in the same rewritten, copyright-safe documentary style. Below is part 2 of the script. Tone, facts, and theme remain intact, but wording and structure stay fully original. Training for the moment no one wanted to face. So he never pretended the lapel knife was a miracle. Instructors were brutally honest. If an agent reached the point where this blade was needed, the mission had already failed. The network was compromised. Arrest had happened. The odds were terrible. But British planners believed something important. Desperation could still be weaponized. At SOE training facilities scattered across Britain, places like a Reisig House in Scotland, Beaulieu in Hampshire, and a web of anonymous country estates, agents were prepared for a future that planners hoped would never arrive. That future involved a locked room, a guard at arm's length, and no visible way out. This was where the lapel knife entered the syllabus. Fairbairn's dark mathematics. William Fairbairn approached violence clinically. He believed killing was not about strength, rage, or courage. It was about anatomy and timing. At training schools, recruits were introduced to a chilling diagram known informally as the timetable of death. It was not poetry. It was not motivational. It was a chart. A simplified map of the human body, annotated with arteries, depth measurements, and estimated times to unconsciousness after severing them. According to Fairbairn's teachings, the carotid artery lay roughly 2 centimeters beneath the skin, unconsciousness in seconds. The subclavian artery, tucked beneath the collarbone, even faster. The femoral artery, catastrophic blood loss if reached. The brachial artery, disabling, painful, and fast. Numbers were attached to each. 5 seconds. 3 seconds. 10 seconds. Modern medicine would later challenge these claims. But accuracy was never the point. Belief was. Why the numbers didn't matter. Years after the war, Fairbairn's American student Rex Applegate admitted the truth. At a knife collector's event in the 1980s, Applegate explained that the timetable wasn't medically precise, and it wasn't meant to be. Young agents heading into occupied Europe were facing capture, torture, and execution. They needed something harder than hope. They needed certainty. The belief that one clean movement could change everything. The lapel knife was as much a psychological weapon as a physical one. It told agents, "You are never completely unarmed. How agents were taught to use it. Training emphasized speed over finesse. The grip was unconventional. Agents looped a thin cord around the index finger, anchoring the blade. The weapon was pinched between thumb and forefinger, blade protruding just beyond the knuckles. This minimized movement, maximized control, prevented disarmament. There was no wind-up, no dramatic motion, just a short, violent thrust. Instructors drilled the motion endlessly. On canvas dummies, on sandbags, on slabs of meat suspended from hooks. The movement had to bypass thought entirely. If hesitation entered the equation, the guard would win. The scenario everyone understood. SOE training never framed the lapel knife as an offensive tool. It was taught within a very specific mental picture. An interrogation room. Hands restrained. A guard standing close, too close. The agent makes a small, non-threatening movement. Adjusting clothing. Touching a collar. Shifting posture. The guard sees nothing unusual. Then everything changes. A sudden strike to the neck. Or the arm reaching for a weapon. Blood. Pain. Shock. Not a guaranteed escape. Just disorder. And in disorder, possibility. The silence of the records. Here history becomes uncomfortable. Despite decades of research, no confirmed operational account exists of an SOE agent using a lapel knife during interrogation. No report. No declassified mission summary. No post-war testimony. The dramatic image, a bound agent killing a guard in Avenue Foch and escaping into Paris, remains just that. An image. But absence of proof is not proof of absence. SOE records were destroyed deliberately after the war. Others remain classified or fragmented. The organization operated on secrecy layered upon secrecy. Even its official historian, MRD. Foote, worked under restrictions so severe, he was forbidden from discussing his research with family. What survives is incomplete by design. What is documented? Desperate resistance. While no confirmed lapel knife kill exists, resistance by captured agents certainly does. One of the most dramatic cases involves Frank Pickersgill, a Canadian SOE operative captured in 1943. Held at SD headquarters in Paris, Pickersgill attempted escape in 1944. According to post-war investigations led by Vera Atkins, Pickersgill attacked his guards using a broken wine bottle. He killed at least one, possibly two. Then he jumped from a second-story window. He survived the fall, with a shattered arm, only to be shot multiple times in the courtyard below. Pickersgill did not use a concealed blade. He used whatever was available, which is precisely the mindset SOE encouraged. Other shadowed cases. Another agent, Michael Trotobers, leader of the SOE farmer network in northern France, was killed during a German raid in 1943. German reports indicate that 2 attackers were killed and others wounded during the assault. What weapon Trotobers used remains unclear. The record ends there. These fragmented stories highlight a reality SOE understood well. When agents fought back, they did so with improvisation, violence, and desperation. The lapel knife fit perfectly into that philosophy. Why the knife still mattered. Critics sometimes dismiss the lapel knife as symbolic, a morale tool rather than a practical weapon. That misses the point. SOE never measured success by body count. They measured it by agency. The knife gave captured operatives something priceless. A choice. Not safety. Not survival. But action. And in wartime psychology, that matters. A weapon other nations didn't copy, except one. Interestingly, no equivalent German program for sewn-in micro-daggers has been identified. The SD, Abwehr, and Gestapo relied on false papers, infiltrators, informants, and overwhelming force. They didn't prepare their operatives for capture in the same way. The Americans did. When the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, formed in 1942, it adopted British designs almost wholesale. That included the lapel knife. Tiny Sheffield blades found their way into American training manuals, stitched into civilian clothing headed for Europe and Asia. The philosophy crossed the Atlantic. Invisible weapons for invisible soldiers. By the time agents reached final staging areas, places like Station 15, where operatives received their last briefings, the lapel knife was already sewn in. Tailors worked carefully. Continental stitching patterns. Correct fabric weight. Proper button styles. German searchers were trained to spot British manufacturing quirks. One incorrect seam could mean death. When done properly, the knife vanished. It became fabric. Thread. Nothing. The weapon that wanted to disappear. Unlike the Fairbairn Sykes dagger, which was produced in the millions, lapel knives were made in tiny numbers. Records are incomplete. Serial numbers rare. Provenance difficult. Today, genuine examples are exceptionally scarce. Museums like the Imperial War Museum hold verified specimens, displayed alongside explosive rats and coal bombs, relics of Britain's strangest war. Collectors warn that reproductions vastly outnumber originals. Which feels appropriate. The weapon designed to be unseen has mostly vanished. The problem with proof. Historians are uncomfortable with uncertainty. They want documents. Reports. After-action summaries. The lapel knife offers almost none of these. Despite extensive research through declassified SOE archives, interrogation records, and post-war testimonies from German officers, no definitive case confirms an agent killing or escaping using a lapel knife. That absence has led some to label the weapon exaggerated, or worse, fictional. But that interpretation misunderstands how SOE worked. SOE was designed to leave no trail. The Special Operations Executive did not behave like a conventional military unit. It did not keep clean logs. It did not write detailed after-action reports for failed agents. It did not publicize mistakes. Entire operational files were destroyed intentionally after the war to protect surviving resistance members and intelligence methods. Some agents were never officially acknowledged at all. When a captured operative died under interrogation, the cause was often recorded simply as shot while attempting escape or executed. Details vanished. If a lapel knife was used, the event would have lasted seconds. Chaos, violence, gunfire, and then silence. There would be no surviving witness eager to document it. Why the knife wasn't meant to be famous. SOE weapons that became legendary, the Welrod pistol, the Fairbairn Sykes dagger, explosive rats, all shared one trait. They were used repeatedly. The lapel knife was different. It existed for a scenario planners hoped would never occur. If an agent reached for it, the operation had already collapsed. The network was burned. The radio compromised. The escape lines exposed. From an intelligence standpoint, the knife represented failure. That alone explains its absence from celebratory histories. The philosophy of one last option. SOE doctrine accepted that many agents would die. This was not cynicism. It was realism. Occupied Europe was saturated with informants. German counterintelligence was aggressive, adaptive, and brutal. Planners could not guarantee extraction. They could not guarantee silence under torture. But they could provide agency. The lapel knife embodied that principle. It didn't promise survival. It promised choice. What the Germans didn't anticipate. German security forces excelled at breaking systems. They mapped networks. Turned agents. Ran captured radios to transmit false information. But they did not prioritize preparing their own operatives for capture in the same way. The SD and Gestapo assumed control through dominance. False papers. Uniform deception. Local collaborators. Their worldview did not include the idea that a prisoner, stripped and restrained, could still be dangerous. SOE challenged that assumption. American adoption. Proof of concept. When the United States created the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, in 1942, it leaned heavily on British experience. British instructors trained American recruits. British manuals were copied directly. British weapons were issued without modification. That included the lapel knife. OSS operatives received sewn-in blades identical in philosophy to their British counterparts. The Americans didn't adopt myths. They adopted methods. Variants and evolution. As production continued, several variations emerged. Not because the original failed, but because different missions demanded different concealment. A lapel knife, short, fast, minimal. A sleeve dagger, longer, spike-oriented, greater penetration. A insole dagger, curved blade hidden inside a shoe, retrieved via cord. Each followed the same rule. It must survive a search. All were finished in non-reflective black. All avoided ornamentation. All prioritized invisibility over durability. Training the mind, not just the hand. Instructors emphasized restraint. The knife was not to be used impulsively. It was not for anger. It was for timing. Agents were taught to wait for proximity, a guard leaning close, a moment of complacency. Only then. The blade created an opening. Nothing more. Why no success stories exist? There is a darker explanation for the lack of confirmed success. If an agent escaped using a lapel knife, the mission would still be catastrophic. They would be injured. Hunted. Alone. Most escape attempts ended in death within hours or days. Victory did not always mean survival. It meant denying the enemy information. The knife as insurance. The lapel knife was never meant to be cashed in. It was insurance. A last resort that cost almost nothing in weight, space, or detection risk. 40 grams of steel and thread. That was all. Collectors, myths, and vanishing evidence. Today, genuine lapel knives are among the rarest SOE artifacts. Production records are incomplete. Serial numbers inconsistent. Provenance often relies on oral history. Auction houses occasionally list examples, some genuine, many not. Collectors warn that reproductions vastly outnumber originals. Again, fitting. The weapon designed to vanish did exactly that. Why the knife still matters. The lapel knife was not about killing. It was about defiance. About refusing helplessness. In occupied Europe, where the enemy controlled everything, movement, speech, even identity, the smallest weapon carried enormous meaning. It told agents they were not finished. Not yet.